Program funding for the Organic Odyssey was provided by the California Certified Organic Farmers Foundation, as well as the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. Visit their web pages or social media for all their amazing content and guidance on everything organic. Support for the Organic Odyssey is provided in part by the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research at Cal Poly. For more information or to support the center, please visit organic.calpoly.edu. That's organic.calpoly.edu for the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research at Cal Poly. Support for the Organic Odyssey is provided in part by AgCom Central. Visit AgCom Central on twitch.tv or youtube.com for all content ag-related. That's AgCom Central on twitch.tv or youtube.com for AgCom Central.
Hello everyone, my name is Emery Pura and I'm here with my co-host Amanda Kidd. Welcome to the 4th episode of Season 2, Organic Odyssey, Journeying Through Sustainable Farming at Cal Poly. Today we will be talking about organic fertilizer ingredients with Jason Miller. We are joined by a great panel today. Jason, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little background about how you got into the industry and Nature Safe in Darling?
Yeah, so my name is Jason Miller. I'm a proud Cal Poly graduate, crop science 1997, which is a long time ago, even though I don't feel like I'm old yet. At Cal Poly, I started interning for Helena Chemical and worked there. Actually got paid to represent Helena on campus as their intern coordinator, and went to work as a sales rep for Helena for 5 or 6 years, and then went to work as an in-house PCA for one of my large growers, and then kind of moved over to the chemical manufacturing side, and then ran a couple of retail facilities for Simplot and Pinnacle Ag, and then was selling metam sodium, which is a soil fumigant. And in 2022, I went from selling metam sodium to selling organic fertilizer for Darling Ingredients. And with Darling, I am the Western Regional Sales Manager for their Nature Safe Organic Fertilizer Division. And I like to tell people Darling is the largest agricultural company you've never heard of. In plant agriculture, Darling doesn't really have a place, but if you're in animal agriculture, we are the largest independent renderer in the world and the largest publicly traded rendering company. So it's been a little bit of a change, but it's been a really cool journey working for Darling.
That's awesome. Dr. Grieshop, would you like to introduce yourself also?
So I'm Dr. Matt Grieshop, the director here for the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research at Cal Poly. And it's a real pleasure to have Jason with us today. We've actually done some research with his company, looking at some characteristics of their fertilizer products. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with, can you first off just describe the importance of organic fertilizer and then just the importance of fertilizer in general for some who may not know?
So I have a sales rep that I work with down in Yuma, and she likes to talk about the importance of fertility, especially in organics, is that you only have one opportunity to get your fertility right in organic produce production, because it's such a short window and our tools are so short, or our tools are so limited in organic agricultural production, that fertility is really, really important in getting the right product, the right nutrient in the right place at the right time. And in agriculture in general, fertility is really the building block of what you have. I mean, water, I think, is the most important, but you could overcome a lot of mistakes in farming with good fertility. And, it's proven that soil health and fertility make for healthier plants, which in theory can save growers a lot of costs in pest, weed control, increase harvestability and fruit quality, food quality, and all that stuff. So fertility is definitely important. And I think in organic agriculture, it's probably one of the most important things that growers face.
Yeah.
Do you want to touch on that at all?
Yeah, no, I'd say that. I mean, one of the sort of old organic mantras is healthy soils, healthy plants, healthy people. And fertility is really at the base of that. And, one of the interesting things I think about organic fertility programs is how poorly understood they are. So, if you look at a conventional fertility program, you're using, chemical fertilizers that are, we like to say mineralized. So they're available. They're plant available. So basically it's like you're just dropping plant food into the soil and the plants can just grab that and use it. In organic fertility programs, we're not using, synthetically derived, immediately plant available mineralized nutrients. We're using the things that will eventually become mineralized available plant nutrients. And so that's really where, a company like NatureSafe and Darling comes in. So they're basically packaging sort of the, things that were once living essentially into, a product that growers can then put into their soil to feed the soil to eventually feed the plant. But there is this process that has to happen with organic fertility products in the field. It's not like they just are available. You need microbial life and other living aspects of that soil environment we just keep talking about on this podcast to make it available to the plant. And, it's challenging. I mean, the beautiful thing about conventional fertility is it's very predictable. It's very consistent. It's like, well, I put this many pounds of nitrate on, there's that many pounds of nitrate available. With an organic system, the nitrogen to make that nitrate, for example, is there, but there are processes it has to go through to get there. And again, that's why, talking with folks who work in the industry is so important, because they're at the base of that. They're really, providing that fertility to serve this year's crop and then hopefully improve the soil so that we just have better crops, in the decades to come.
It's like a big recipe that you guys are making. It seems like.
Yeah. Well, and that's where, Jason has a lot more information. Like, obviously, we're not asking for the secret recipe, but
So is it like
general recipe.
You like not train the soil, but kind of get it healthier and healthier? Will you have to use less fertilizer eventually? That's
actually a really good question. And so some of the research we do at the center is really around that. And this is interesting. So the research I was talking about that Jason and I collaborated on was we were looking at some of their pelleted fertilizer products. What we were really interested in was, well, you can make these pellets and you can make them in a different density. And there's a big shipping and application advantage to having them as dense as possible, because basically the denser the pellets, the more you can put on your hopper, on your tractor, the less trips you have to make to refill it. So the more you can get out per trip, which is a big advantage. But there were questions about, well, does that affect mineralization rate? So are the microbes able to access fertilizer in the denser pellet relative to the looser pellets? Right. And Darling was kind enough to provide the fertilizers and funding for us to do an undergraduate Cal Poly project. And what we found was it doesn't seem to really make too much of a difference. We did find that if you completely grind the fertilizers down, it will mineralize somewhat faster. But in terms of the pellets, the density didn't matter. And I kind of feel like I lost track of your original question.
That's fine.
Yeah, and you should jump in, Jason, because I'm a talker and I'll just keep talking.
Well, now I forgot the question.
I think it was like, I was saying, like, can you, like, if you keep getting
improving
healthier,
the soil.
improving the soil.
Sorry. And so I kind of moved away from that.
Fertilizer.
Yeah. So there are factors we control. It's interesting. There's definitely quality differences in organic fertilizers, and as you improve your soil, as you get more soil organic matter or life in the soil, typically your soil becomes more and more able to break down and mineralize nutrients. I mean, that's something that
so as time goes on, it just keeps getting better.
Right, if you invest in it. The interesting thing is if you go the synthetic route, typically what happens is, you basically are shutting down all those systems because you're short-circuiting. You're moving right to the mineralized nutrient that the plant needs, and the soil is going to respond to that by sort of dying. I mean, the plant and the plant microbe interactions don't need to exist because you're just giving the plant what it needs immediately. So in the organic system, it's really about building that capacity. And then we think over time, yeah, you can probably get away with less fertilizer in it, but you've got to build the system first. And I think that's one place that's really exciting in the organic fertilizer industry is really thinking about that question. Like, okay, how do we develop fertility programs? So if I'm starting from a soil that, doesn't have a lot of life in it, how do I build a program that's going to make me profitable today, but is also going to improve the quality of that soil so that over time I can shift to, a less intensive fertility program? And to me, that's sort of like the holy grail.
Yeah, Jason, you want to touch on
Yeah,
that?
sorry.
Yeah, what we call that internally in our Nature Safe team is we call it the fertilizer factory effect. And, where Nature Safe has been around for 35 years out of our Henderson, Kentucky plant, kind of where Nature Safe got its start, there are several golf courses, turf operations, and organic farms in the East that have been using Nature Safe pelleted fertilizers, animal protein based fertilizers year after year. And we have seen exponential plant health and growth response and soil response that don't really coincide with the rates that we were applying that current year, but just building that healthy soil environment, our products, work exponentially better year after year. We call that like I said, the fertilizer factory effect. And then there's some other research that's come out of Canada specific to meat and bone meal, and even University of Hawaii has done some research where when you look at meat and bone meal specifically, you get some nematocidal properties, you get some plant pathology, some pathogen, some fungicidal effects of meat and bone meal. And, over time, those benefits build, but then the research shows that when growers quit applying meat and bone meal, those results drop off immediately. So I think there is a lot of truth to that. You build repetitive applications of some of the animal proteins do have long-term soil benefits and creating a very healthy soil environment.
That's awesome. Yeah. So it sounds like the products, most of the ingredients in the fertilizer is like dead animals. But if you could just describe like the main ingredients and like everything in the organic fertilizer, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So Darling, like I said, we're the biggest independent or publicly traded rendering company. Independent means we're not tied into a animal feeding operation like a Cargill or a Tyson. We take byproducts from slaughterhouses, packing operations. So, and then we dehydrate, we render those, which is basically dehydrating. We separate out the fats from the proteins. And Darling is pretty cool because we started in 1880 and we were green before green was ever really cool. We're a huge recycling company.
That's a long time.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's been around for a while.
So, in Darling, like my group, we take animal proteins, which are primarily meat and bone meal and feather meal, and we make those into fertilizer. But Darling, we take the fats, and we have a joint venture with Valero Energy called Diamond Green Diesel, where we're taking that fat. We're also taking used cooking oil from companies like Chick-fil-A and Panda Express and Costco, taking that UCO and our animal fats and making sustainable aviation fuel, sustainable.
Oh, wow.
It's very like recyclable.
Also. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome that you take like the byproducts.
It's using every part of the animal ultimately. But so in addition to the animal byproducts, so for speaking towards the Nature Safe products, what are some of the other components that go into your fertilizer pellets? So there's obviously
So
there's feather meal, blood meal, bone meal, etc.
yeah, so our two big ones are feather mill and meat and bone mill. Um, then we'll use like a steamed bone mill. We'll use bone chips. Um, we do use some manure on a couple of our formulations, dehydrated poultry manure. But really, things that Darling works with are animal proteins. So um, whether it's beef, poultry, porcine. We sell a product that's a spray dried hemoglobin. We have a company that's headquartered in Europe, but we have one plant in um, Iowa called Sonac. And Sonac, um, we centrifuge blood. We bring in porcine blood, run it through our centrifuge, separate out the plasma from the hemoglobin. The hemoglobin goes through a spray dryer, and we sell a spray dried hemoglobin product. So we're using blood, we're using bone, we're using feather, um, we're using obviously the protein. And from those two building blocks, primarily, three building blocks are high nitrogen feather mill, our meat and bone mill, and then some of our just straight bone mill or blood mill. So four, we're making different analysis, and we'll add like a sulfate of potash. Um, we've got customers that are asking us to pellet things like humic acid or biochar or some of these other products that are harder to deliver that we're trying to run through our pellet mills as well.
Yeah. Can you describe like the difference between organic fertilizers and conventional fertilizers, like maybe like applying them or like the ingredients in them, all of that stuff?
So, organic fertilizers primarily are going to be manure based, fish hydrolysis, so byproducts, animal proteins, soy proteins, corn steep liquor. Those are some of the real big organic um, feedstocks that we use to build our fertilizer. Um, Application wise, it's my belief that it's the most economical form of nitrogen is through a pelleted fertilizer. Cost per applied unit. Then you look at mineralization, so cost of available unit. But it is significantly more expensive to use organic fertilizers in organic production, and your margin for error is significantly different. If it takes an animal protein 10 to 20 days to mineralize, be available to that plant, you have to time your application so that fertilizer is available to that plant when that plant needs it. And when you're looking at a 30-day crop, like a spinach crop or a baby leaf crop or any of these bag salad crops, like in Salinas or down in the desert, you only have 30 days to get that crop out of the field. So you have to be very precise in your fertilizer application and when you're using it, what you're using it, when it's going to become available, versus a conventional fertilizer that you can go out there and water run a liquid nitrogen, or you can, use a foliar, or, there's just so many more constraints for an organic farmer to get their fertilizer in the time that they need it to be available when they need it. You don't have as many options. It's way more expensive to try to get liquid nitrogen to an organic plant than it is a conventional plant. So there's just a lot of cost. You asked about conventional, and then you have the whole food safety thing in organics, which is a completely another avenue that growers have to be concerned about. There's products you can't apply or products that you don't want to fully apply because of the effect of food safety. Versus conventional, we have a whole toolbox of what we can use. It's significantly lower cost. You can afford to, in an orchard situation, you can afford to run UN32. In row crops, you can even use anhydrous ammonia, which is significantly less expensive. So organic production, I think, is it's a lot. You've got to be a lot more diligent in getting your best bang for your buck in fertility with organic agriculture.
Yeah. So because you mentioned the pellets that you guys sell for fertilizer, is there like other forms like liquid or just pellets?
Yeah, so in organic fertility, nature safe, we primarily focus on pelleted products. So we take our animal proteins and pellet those to make a pellet that a grower can broadcast over his field. He can shank it in, but it needs to be incorporated. There are a lot of liquid products out there. Primarily, guys want to be able to put those through their drip systems. And then there are foliar organic fertilizers as well. So we have kind of the same, there's no differentiation between, the application method or the the way the product's built, liquid, dry, foliar. It's just the choices are more limited to how we can get that nitrogen to the plant when it's needed in an organic situation versus a conventional situation.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about like fertility and just the importance of that. Are there any exciting new developments on new sources of fertility that you guys have found or anything like that?
So at Darling, Matt and I had talked a little bit before the podcast about our EnviroFly group, which is our black soldier fly larva. We're looking at trying to find a home for the frass from that to see if that would be an option for our organic fertilizer line. We have played around with some liquid corn steep liquor at this point, but I always joke that Darling doesn't render corn plants. It's in our best interest to find use for our animal proteins. So we're looking at different uses for some of our animal proteins, and really, I think one of the biggest challenges as a rendering company is blood. What can we do with raw blood? Because right now we're paying to cogen it. You have to landfill it in some places. So we really have an interest in, can we find a way to efficiently and effectively incorporate more raw blood into our fertilizer products and still doing it meeting the food safety guidelines that the industry expects us to maintain.
Yeah, are the food safety guidelines pretty strict when it comes to like organic fertilizers?
Yeah, they're strict for all,
Yeah.
bismuth,
Mm-hmm.
we're all eating
Yeah,
this
yeah.
food, nobody wants to eat anything that's going to make us sick. But yeah, for organic agriculture, well, no, there's really no difference. Like I said, it's all about how you get there. How do you get that nitrogen? So with organic agriculture and, in particular for California, Arizona, the LGMA requirements, food safety is a huge driver. Most of the nitrogen sources are all going to be or manure, animal proteins, some sort of waste stream. So most of the producers, have processes in place to meet those requirements. At Darling and Turlock, at the fertilizer manufacturing facility that all the product that my team sells comes out of, we have a steam conditioner. So we bring up, we have a validated kill step where we heat treat that before it becomes a pellet. We heat treat those ingredients, bring it up to 200 degrees. If that conditioner drops below 200 degrees, then the steam conditioner will shut off automatically until it comes back up to temperature. and then we run it through our pellet mill and cool it back down. And that is a verified kill step to ensure that anything that passes through that step will be pathogen free after it becomes a pellet. But you look at products like blood, it's hard to heat it up, it cooks, it burns. So we have to be mindful of how can we effectively remove those pathogens in something like a blood. I think at Darling, we're fortunate. Most of the product that we bring into our plant comes from a Darling rendering plant. Darling rendering plants are all FSMA, EPA compliant, FDA inspected and compliant. So most of the proteins that we make go into feed, animal feed. So we are getting some of the cleanest animal proteins in the market directly from our rendering plants that go into our fertilizer plants. So I think being vertically integrated through the value chain helps us with our quality control and our food safety standards. And we have PhDs, involved in food safety. We just hired a new woman on the fertilizer team that just defended her PhD in foodborne pathogens through University of Georgia. And she's a really exciting new member of our team because, she spent the last 6 years of her education doing this and teaching food safety classes and educating, her students on food safety and the process, to ensure that we're feeding the world a safe food supply.
Yeah, that's very important to have safe food.
It's interesting that is a challenge that we face in organic systems, because so much of what we're doing fertility-wise depends on microbial communities, right? And it's always a balancing act. There are microbial communities you absolutely have to have to make nutrients available to the plants, but then of course there are microbes you really don't want. And I think that's one of the big challenges we face in organics with food safety. And it's been an interesting journey. And actually, we're going to talk about that in a future podcast. So, coming up. But Jason, I'm an entomologist, and you talked about black soldier flies. So I feel like we need to talk about black soldier flies a little. So black soldier flies the adults are short-lived, big black flies, which is why they're called black soldier flies. But it's interesting, the adults don't feed. All they do is get together and mate and lay eggs. And they lay eggs. In nature, they're composters. So they lay eggs in dead stuff, and then their larvae sort of process that dead stuff into new black soldier flies. And then the frass that Jason was talking about is insect poop. It's insect manure, if you will. But that's a really exciting sector of the ag recycling economy right now, I think, because probably some of our listeners are familiar with vermicomposting or worm bins, worm composting. So, annelids or red worms are really good at processing plant material that's really high in carbon and low in nitrogen. And the cool thing about black soldier flies is that they're the opposite. They're actually pretty miserable plant material that's really high in carbon and low in nitrogen. We got a little echo. That's all right. It's done. Black soldier flies, if you're keeping a worm bin and you put a bunch of like animal byproducts, fatty, oily, proteiny stuff, you'll kill your worms. Black soldier flies are the opposite. That's exactly what they like. They love it. In fact, there's some videos on YouTube you can find of black soldier flies versus dead salmon, and you can watch in time lapse. I think some Swedish researchers did this, where they did black soldier flies versus a Big Mac.
I've seen that.
And they just take it apart.
Yeah,
it's gone really fast. So they're a really interesting component of breaking down some of these food waste. So especially for post-consumer waste, where you get this horrible mixed waste stream the nice thing for a rendering plant, and Jason, please correct me if I'm wrong, it's like, okay, if it's a cow plant, a slaughterhouse or whatnot, you're getting cow parts out of that. And that's all you're getting. And you're probably getting, skin and bone and other products. If you think about, food waste from a consumer standpoint, it's everything. So it's, it's lettuce and it's leftover tacos and it's, whatever else was,
a whole jumble of
right.
everything.
And maybe there's some wrappers in there too. And that's where the black soldier flies get interesting because they can, they can process through a lot of that stuff.
For someone who doesn't know, so you want them, how would you use them then? Because he's saying that you take all that stuff and put it into the pellets. So wouldn't you want them not to eat it and make it disappear?
Well, so that's a really great question, Amanda. So the really neat thing about the black soldier fly sort of economy is that actually you get two products out of them. And so EnviroFlight, which is the company Jason was talking about, they actually upcycle the larval black soldier fly as an animal feed ingredient. So the insects themselves become a feed ingredient.
Got it, okay.
And then all their byproducts become a fertility ingredient.
Oh, so they take that and then they put that into the pellets that Jason was talking about.
Right, which, have you guys looked at actually using black soldier fly, the larvae, as a fertilizer input?
I don't believe we looked at the larvae as a fertilizer input. I know that EnviroFlight is actively selling the frass as a non-organic fertilizer. And the reason that we currently don't have it as an organic fertilizer is we are feeding it, we call it cookie dough. So another thing that bakery or that Darling does is we have a bakery feeds division. So we take, have you guys ever eaten those Uncrustable sandwiches?
Oh gosh, yeah.
So there is crust on those to begin with. So all that crust, we bring in all that crust into our bakery feeds plant. We dehydrate it, we grind it down, and we turn that into animal feed. And we do the same thing with the one time I was in a bakery feeds plant, we had truckloads of Ritz crackers. We have, Hostess cupcakes. So anything that at a grocery store can't sell from their bakery or their baked goods, the cookie aisle or the cracker aisle, Darling recycles all of that and turns it into animal feed as well. So we currently are using cookie feed in that, or cookie mill, and the way that they would harvest the frass, that cookie mill's not organically certified, so we can't collect the frass because there's still cookie mill in there. But I mean, I have a vested interest in finding an organic use for the black soldier fly larva because, once again, the coolest thing about working in the organic fertilizer space for Darling is the fact that we are so integrated and vertically integrated, and we can pretty much find a use for everything that comes through a Darling plant. And so that's really exciting to work for a company like Darling, where kind of the sky's the limit on innovation. We have all these materials available to us. We just have to find a way to put it to use.
Yeah, and it's recycling. It's great.
Yeah, like I said, we were green when green wasn't cool.
Yeah, this industry sounds very interesting and obviously very necessary. So if a student wanted to get involved in the fertilizer industry, what steps would you recommend they take, or are there any opportunities to do so?
Well, if they're not going to Cal Poly now, they should definitely transfer to Cal Poly. But,
thanks for the plug.
I think what was key for me in my career was, internships. At Cal Poly, when I was enrolled there, we had awesome internships, and just do as many different jobs. Or if you like your current job, like me, I started working for Helena my first year at Cal Poly, and it just every year I worked for Helena, and then they offered me a job when I graduated. So I think the more exposure you can get to the industry, internships, senior projects, go to Ag Showcase and just talking to different companies, the Crops Club, when companies come to the Crops Club, or when Western Plant Health Association sponsors the industry dinners, just get involved with the industry, meet people. If you have an opportunity to do an internship, do it, and you may love it, you may hate it, and then if you don't like that job, go find one that you like. But just getting involved as early as possible you know, in the professional aspect of it. And, also something that people kind of overlook is the networking that happens in college and in those clubs. You know, one of our several of my biggest distributors and customers and people I work with in a daily basis in the business are friendships that I formed at Cal Poly through classes and clubs and some of the other social things that we got into when we were at Cal Poly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cal Poly's good for that and meet so many amazing people.
Great environment.
Yeah.
Best alumni too.
Best alumni. Yeah, so do you have any other questions or anything?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
Mm-hmm.
I think just for me, whenever I have a chat with Jason and his colleagues, it does return me to thinking about how important the organic fertilizer industry can be for recycling organic wastes. And here in California, of course, we have mandated composting rules now. And, one of the things that I think when those regulations are put together, I don't think that the powers that be really were thinking about how, okay, we're going to compost all this stuff. Now what are we going to do with it? And that's where, again, getting back to this recycling of byproducts, recycling. And, Jason, you were talking about, I didn't expect to hear about cookie dough today. I figured we'd mostly talk about, cows and pigs and chickens, maybe fish. But that's really fascinating to me. And I think it's there's such an opportunity there. But then, of course, like we've also talked about food safety, and there are the sort of, the counterpoint to that is we have to be able to do it in a safe way where we can, as much as possible, provide healthy food that is safe. And it's
Matt, I went to my first Western food safety conference, the one that Hartnell College hosts. Last year was the first time I attended that, and I walked away from there amazed. If everybody, the consumer, knew how much time, effort, energy, and expense that the producers, and not just the input manufacturers like Darling, but these actual growers spend to safely feed the world, they would be amazed. I always say maybe they would give us a pass that once in a while, something gets through. But it's amazing the dedication that the industry, we have a desire to safely feed people because we all eat this food too, and our employees and our families eat this food. But it's just amazing. We do strive to provide the safest food supply possible. And I think that if the average consumer knew how much effort we spend to safely feed them, they would be amazed, because it was mind-blowing. I think everybody should go to that conference if they get the opportunity.
Well, and to your point, it was surprising to me to learn about how the fertilizers go through kill steps, right? So I mean that's the first piece, right? But then to your point, yeah, all of our growers have food safety plans in place for every step of production, for harvest. And then when you move from harvest, whether it's an organization that is vertically integrated or they're selling to a packing house, it just continues, and it really continues all the way to the point of sale. And there's so much thought and care and consideration and rigorous practice that's in place there. So yeah, it is pretty amazing.
That'd be a good opportunity for some of us AgCom students to let consumers know, we will on the podcast, the food safety podcast.
Yeah, well, we are right now.
Yeah, and right now. But I agree with them. I don't think the average consumer has any idea how much goes into food safety.
Oh, no.
They only hear about the outbreaks and all that. They don't know how much time and effort goes into it. That's a really good point.
All you hear about is when people get sick. You never hear about the good or how long it takes.
Yeah.
Well, that gets into sort of risk management thought. And one thing I'm not up on the current CDC data on produce-related illness. So foodborne. The vast majority of foodborne illness is caused by poor handling of food, right? So people don't wash their hands. That's way more common than coming from the farm or from the processing house. But as late as around 2009, I did look into some of that data, and you've got, at that time, we've got better detection now, so we probably see the problem better now than we did back then. But at that point, where we weren't paying as much attention, it was something like 15,000 cases per year is what CDC could attribute to, pre-final food handling, so preparation essentially, or bad storage, like if you let it mold and eat it.
That does not sound good.
No, it isn't.
And that's their fault. Yeah, that's not the
But
people's fault.
so this is something that came through the system, through the production, that part of the supply chain. But and that sounds like a lot of people, and that ranges from people with a stomach ache to a very few fatalities, which is always very tragic. But if you think about, at the time our population was around 330 million, and if people ate 3 pieces of produce a day, that's 1 billion pieces of produce a day. So 365.25 billion pieces of produce a year, and there are 15,000 problems.
That's a good.
And so it and that doesn't mean we shouldn't strive to do better. I'm not trying to suggest that at all, but I'm just saying that that's pretty amazing. I mean, the safety of our produce and our food is really amazing. And yeah, there are unfortunate things that happen and tragedies, but they're very rare, frankly. And so to your point, yeah, we fixate on when there is a problem, but it's kind of like shark attacks. Like, a lot of people are scared of shark attacks, but you're way more likely to get run over on the way to the beach, in the parking lot. And when you're walking to the shore, then you already get bit by a shark, even where there's great whites. And it's the same kind of thing. And I think that's where that consumer education is so important, is that people know. Because to your point, Jason, I think, what you said that's really beautiful is that, all of us in this industry are really putting our time and effort to create healthy food for people. And part of that is safe food. It's not, it's our goal.
Do you think there's a better way to educate the typical consumer? Or do you think that the education that has been put out has been pretty
Well,
good?
I think it's unfortunate. I mean, this might be like soil, a common theme. And one of the reasons we do this podcast is because so few people are really involved in production agriculture day to day. Which is also an amazing thing. You stop to think about it. I mean, by my calculation, you really have somewhere around 6 million people, maybe as many as 8, that are really engaged in producing the food that the vast majority of us eat. And then you've got another 10 or so million people who lose money farming, like I did when I was a farmer, and a small scale. And but there's around 350 million of us in this country. And so there's so many, we all eat, but so very few of us really have that privilege to really be engaged with the food system in a really intimate way. And I think it's amazing that we've been able to build a technological society where we can do that, but on the other hand, it's created this massive rift and disconnect. And food safety is one element of that, but other, understanding that it's really hard to make a living farming. The margins on farming, for the most part, are really low. You have to be really smart, really hardworking, and you really have to have it together. And you could lose everything due to a bad weather event. Yeah, or something like that. And so, yeah, I think that's one of those big challenges. That's really what drives me to talk with people about agriculture. And I mean, the purpose of this podcast, really at heart, is, hey, let's talk about farming. Let's talk about agriculture. Let's talk about food. Let's understand that, it's a really wonderful thing, the access to food we enjoy in this society. And there are some very dedicated people making it happen because they're passionate about it. Not because, we just had the Super Bowl and the halftime show, and, folks could probably name most of the performers in that, but, how many farmers can you name?
I think that's a good point.
But I'm that's my soapbox.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. I learned so much today. I hope everyone enjoyed this podcast. Thank you, Dr. Grieshop. Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Thanks for joining us,
thanks
Jason.
for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Program funding for the Organic Odyssey was provided by the California Certified Organic Farmers Foundation, as well as the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. The show was created by Matt Grieshop, the talent coordinator and resident organic expert, as well as Moses Mike, the faculty production lead. The guest for this episode was Jason Miller. The Organic Odyssey is a production of the AGC 225 class called Digital Communications and Agriculture. The student team that produced the show included Andrew Angulo, the director, hosts Amanda Kidd and Emery Pura, and the technical team, Bailey Knirk, Daniela Rodriguez Ruiz, Delaney Browder, Katie Cook, and Sierra Fugman. The Organic Odyssey is a digital media collaboration between the Agricultural Education and Communications Department and the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research at Cal Poly. These credits were read by Chelsea Ann. Thanks for listening.